Coming up on Network Africa, Sierra Leone denies West African regional bloc Ecowas is under foreign influence after accusations by Niger, Mali and Burkina Faso. United Nations Security Council to discuss the row between Somalia and Ethiopia over the Somaliland deal. Plus, African leaders gather in Rome, Italy for the two-day Italy-Africa Summit. Hello and welcome to the program this week. I'm Layo Olarinde. We begin here in West Africa, where regional bloc ECOWAS says it is yet to receive any direct formal notification from Mali, Niger and Burkina Faso of their intention to withdraw from the community. In a communique issued on Sunday, the bloc said it was aware of the national statements made in the junta-led countries and is working assiduously to restore constitutional order. The trio had jointly announced their exit from ECOWAS, saying that the bloc is under the influence of foreign powers, betraying its founding principles and has become a threat to member states and people. However, Sierra Leone's Foreign Minister Timothy Musa Kaba has denied the accusations. Mr. Kaba, who was part of the team that had been mediating between ECOWAS and the junta-led regime, says the accusations are unfortunate as ECOWAS intervention was intended to find a solution to the impasse and also to ensure peace, security and stability in the region. Relations between the bloc and the three countries have been tense after the bloc suspended their membership and hit them with economic sanctions after coups in Niger in 2023, Burkina Faso in 2022, and Mali in 2020. The Economic Community of West African States has a procedure for member states' withdrawal, which had these countries been governed by civilian rule would have applied in this situation. Therefore, the announcement by the three junta in a communique is very abnormal for countries wishing to exit the regional community. Our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Amarachi Ubani, gives us more details in this report.
Withdrawing from the Economic Community of West African States is not a tedious process as some would think. It only requires a year's notice, as stipulated in the ECOWAS revised treaty, which states, any member state wishing to withdraw from the community shall give to the Executive Secretary 1 year's notice in writing, who shall inform member states thereof. At the expiration of this period, if such notice is not withdrawn, such a state shall cease to be a member of the community.
Uphold all measures and principles agreed upon.
So far, since its establishment in 1975, the only country that has withdrawn membership from the ECOWAS is Mauritania, when it did so in December 2000. The main goal of the ECOWAS is to promote economic cooperation among member states in order to raise living standards and promote economic development. ECOWAS has also worked to address some security issues by developing a peacekeeping force for conflicts in the region and established its free trade area in 1990 and adopted a common external tariff in January of 2015. In the last 4 years, there have been 7 military coups in West and Central Africa. 4 of these countries are members of ECOWAS. Mali, with the ousting of President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta in 2020, followed by a second coup against interim President Colonel Ba Ndor in 2021, Guinea in 2021, Burkina Faso in 2022, and Niger in 2023. The Niger military coup was perhaps the most shocking for ECOWAS and the one which drew the most reaction, not just from member states, but the continent and indeed the world.
It is crucial that we prioritize diplomatic negotiations.
Nigeria's new president, Bola Tinubu, backed ECOWAS' decision to employ all means to restore the civilian rule of Nigerian President Mohamed Bazoum, including the use of military force. The ECOWAS announcement was its toughest stance yet. although some compare the Niger situation to that of the Gambia, when ECOWAS sent 7,000 troops from neighboring Senegal to compel President Yahya Jammeh to go into exile and cede the presidency to Adama Barrow, who had defeated him in an election. With the recent coup in Burkina Faso, Niger and Mali, ECOWAS is engaged in negotiations with the junta to no avail. The military leaders insist on having their way, but apart from denying knowledge of withdrawal by the three countries, the question is, what happens in the meantime? Amarachi Ubani, Channel Television News.
Ochukwemeka Eze is the Executive Director of the West African Network for Peace Building, WANEP. He says ECOWAS has been too lenient in terms of applications of its rules and procedures in reaction to these three countries withdrawing from ECOWAS. He was speaking on our Foreign Affairs program, Diplomatic Channel, with my colleague Amarachi Ubani.
For me, ECOWAS has done all that it should do. Number one is that there is an existing protocol on democracy and good governance. And it's a normative framework that all the heads of states and governments of the ECOWAS community signed on to. So here is ECOWAS with its own member states violating that normative framework they signed on to, which is zero tolerance to unconstitutional changes of government, no matter the circumstance. And then there is a coup d'etat in Mali, followed by Burkina, followed by Niger, and subsequently even without adding Guinea. So what will ECOWAS do? Adhere to its normative framework or hold its hands and watch the junta take us back to the military era? So ECOWAS, as far as I'm concerned, like you said, have been not just lenient, but over-lenient in terms of application of its rules and procedures. But what we are seeing is a situation where there is an interplay in West Africa, as it were, for the new partition and scramble for Africa. And West African region happened to be the theater for the outplay of all those shenanigans, including the geopolitics surrounding both Russia, France, and all of that. But ECOWAS as an entity must live by its rules and regulations. Otherwise, it loses its own identity. And so when this junta were asking for leniency and time to return to military rule without even a time frame, ECOWAS needed to do what it's supposed to do, which is you can't take more than the required time that is allotted to you.
You can watch more of the interview on Diplomatic Channel at 8:30 p.m. Sky Channel 515 in the UK and 11:30 p.m. on DSTV. We still continue the conversation on this story. Joining us now is African Affairs Analyst Okwe Okwala for more discussions. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Okwala. I want to begin by asking if this has come as a surprise to you, the withdrawal of these three countries from ECOWAS.
Well, anybody watching the body language of the leaders of these three countries will not be entirely surprised by the move. Because they've been very defiant. They reacted angrily to an effort of ECOWAS to bring them back to democracy and constitutional government. And since then, it appears that they are tilting more towards Russia and then, against Western powers, France and the United States, whom they think are controlling ECOWAS leaders. So I think it's not entirely surprising. However, what may surprise one is that in a way they've coordinated their responses to Africa. In fact, to the extent of forming an Sahel alliance, the way they've coordinated this shows that, look, there is a coordinating force. There is and one cannot look beyond a country like Russia. And so it's not entirely surprising. I mean, the first step they took, the way they reacted angrily, the way they defiant, they filed. In fact, call the bluff of ECOWAS leaders, I mean, of course, one would imagine that they are, if not that they will outright withdraw, at least that they don't mind freezing their membership of the ECOWAS.
Well, ECOWAS says, it is committed to finding a negotiated solution with these three countries. How would you suggest, they do this? They've tried so much to, bring these countries back to civilian rule.
Well, I think first, ECOWAS, we must maintain their principles, the principle of constitutional government and democracy. However, we also need to, ECOWAS leaders need to lead by example, because it's not just enough to preach democracy, but also very important to practice democracy in all its dimensions. Because part of what made the African leaders not to be credible in negotiating some of these issues and promoting democracy is because the leaders of the leading countries themselves have manipulated democratic processes, and so they have moral burden. However, in this particular instance, I think the leaders of ECOWAS, and Nigeria in particular as a leader of ECOWAS, should begin to discuss with even the forces that are beating the drum that these three countries are dancing to. In fact, we cannot look beyond Russia. Russia is beating the drum that these three countries are dancing to. And until you engage with Russia and make it clear that we understand the game they are playing, and then you may not, if Russia continues to give them support, unfortunately, and incidentally, they are saying that ECOWAS is being controlled by outside forces. But indeed, one can see that even these three countries are being controlled by outside forces. So one way to negotiate with them is also simultaneously be negotiating to the person who dictates the tune they dance to.
Well, in light of, this withdrawal from these three countries, even though ECOWAS is saying, it has not really received any direct formal notification on this, what should the bloc do to in response to this particular incident?
Well, I think the leaders of ECOWAS should respond with maturity. They can afford to fret and then but then we have to calculate and then negotiate, and we don't have to respond in anger. We have to activate all our the diplomatic processes and continue to engage with them. I think the initial statement is mature, and I like the statement of ECOWAS that they are going to negotiate with them. They didn't respond in anger, they didn't respond in annoyance. But then we have to recognize the interest, and we have to make it clear to them that they lose a lot. Even though ECOWAS may of course, for issues of security, these three countries are about between 33% and 50% of landmass of ECOWAS. So, and then for in terms of security, it matters a lot because if you can't use the government to cover these areas, that means insecurity may be a problem. So, it's interest of ECOWAS to bring them back. But it's also in the interest of these countries to be part of ECOWAS, because part of, most of them need support of ECOWAS. They need the economic free zone that ECOWAS offers. So, based on interest, you can persuade these countries that, look, it serves you better to be with ECOWAS. And then behave properly, because if you behave well, if you maintain democracy, if you restore constitutional governance, then you can be part of our league, and then it will benefit your people and it will benefit your regime. So I think it will be made clear to the leaders that they stand to lose a lot by going the route they are going, and that if they can trace their steps back, and then ECOWAS can make some concessions and then address the issues, genuine issues they are raising about their resources, not the benefit of the people of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, not having the benefit of resources that are deposited on their ground. Some of these issues that led to these agitations and made these coups popular. The ECOWAS and leaders, and indeed other international organizations, should address them frontally, and then find a way to persuade them to join back the
All right, Mr. Okpala, just very quickly, what should ECOWAS be negotiating for? A return to the bloc or civilian rule to the countries? Just very quickly.
I think first they'll have to negotiate return to the bloc, but then it depends on the condition they state and on what is offered. It ultimately, of course, democracy we have to return, because we cannot compromise. ECOWAS should not set their bar too low, so that we can persuade them to come in, but not at the cost of our the basic principles that guide ECOWAS.
All right, then, African Affairs Analyst Okwe Okmala, thank you so much for your analysis and thoughts.
It's always my pleasure. Thank you.
Still ahead on the program. 73 students across the world graduate from the University of Peace in Mogadishu, Somalia. More details after the break. Please join us again. Welcome back to the program. The United Nations Security Council is planning to meet to discuss the tensions between Somalia and Ethiopia over a controversial port deal with the self-declared Republic of Somaliland. Well, Somali State TV reports that the Monday meeting will address concerns and the events in the Horn of Africa. The row was triggered by Ethiopia signing a memorandum of understanding with Somaliland early this month, and that deal gives landlocked Ethiopia access to a seaport for military and commercial purposes. Somalia, which considers Somaliland part of its territory, has rejected the deal and is accusing Ethiopia of violating its sovereignty. Several African leaders are gathered in Italy's capital, Rome, for the Italy-Africa Summit, which is aimed at boosting relations between Africa and the European nation. During the two-day summit, Italy is expected to launch what it calls a new approach for cooperating with African countries, which the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, says is not predatory or paternalistic, but not charitable either. The targeted areas for collaboration include energy, economic and infrastructure development, culture, food security, education, and vocational training. Well, the summit started on Sunday, and it's also aimed at boosting investment in African countries as a way and strategy to curb irregular migration from the continent. Well, several other countries have organized similar summits to strengthen its ties with Africa, including Germany, Russia, and China. Well, several global banks are now at risk of prosecution in South Africa over allegations of manipulating the rand currency during the international forex trading scandal. Well, this scandal has already resulted in substantial fines imposed on the banking industry worldwide by regulators. South Africa's Competition Commission announced its recommendation to prosecute a total of 17 banks. The investigation into rand manipulation was initiated in April 2015. Our South Africa correspondent, Innocent Samosa, has more details.
In what's shaping up to be a major legal upheaval, several global banks face the prospects of prosecution in South Africa over allegations of manipulating the rand. While some political party leaders are calling for strict punishment to rand manipulation implicated banks.
Look, I think from our perspective, firstly, we are seriously disgusted by the conduct of the financial institutions that acted in a very unpatriotic and greedy manner, between the period which is alleged between 2007 and 2013, which we are not too sure of ourselves. However, that behavior is tantamount to economic treason, actually.
In practical terms, what it has done is that it has led to a lot of suffering. A lot of people had their cars repossessed. A lot of people had their houses repossessed. Simply because with the depreciation of the rand, the interest rates went up. And that's why they were making a lot of money out of it. But at whose expense? At the expense of the poor. The economy suffered a lot. The cost of living went up.
Standard Chartered has agreed to pay 42.7 million rand settlement for manipulating the rand exchange rate. Some say the money is simply not enough.
From what we have discovered so far in the research that we've done, we've discovered that they made trillions in profit from fixing the rand. And as a result of that, I believe that just 42 million is literally nothing, not even 1% of how much they made as a result of this negligent behavior.
Meanwhile, economists say this will not have a long-term effect on the South African economy.
Standard and Chartered paid money for the problem to go away. I don't think it should be seen as a fine. And it's also important to note that although there could have been some manipulation in the short term of the exchange rate of the rand, as an example, I don't think it will have a long-term effect on the South African economy. The market is just far too big to have one or two banks, or even a couple of banks, to permanently influence the exchange rate of a currency in one direction or the other. And if they could do that, that specific manipulation will have to be reversed in the other direction soon. So the net effect on prices of the exchange rate, for example, is unlikely to have a significant impact on the financial markets or on the South African economy over time.
They approached us and asked us for assistance because we are in the foreign exchange market.
While the Competition Commission continues with its investigation, it also approached the South African Reserve Bank for assistance. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Innocent Simosa, Channel Television News.
South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has called on Israel to abide by the measures handed down by the International Court of Justice in The Hague after the court ordered the country to take measures to prevent genocide in Gaza. Furthermore, he says Israel should take immediate and effective measures to allow basic services and humanitarian assistance into the besieged strip. For the South African Minister for Justice and Correctional Services, Ronald Lamola, he believes the court's order would put an end to impunity of Israel. He adds that South Africa expects Hamas to comply with the orders to release the hostages as well, calling the ICJ's ruling a victory for the people of Gaza.
It is a victory for international law. It is also a message that there cannot be any exceptionalism in the world. All countries must be treated the same, and Israel is not an exception. It cannot be an exception to the Genocide Convention and the international law and also the conventions of the UN. So I believe this is a victory for the people of Gaza, for the people of Palestine, particularly children and women. They have to comply with the measures as indicated by the ICJ. There is no exceptionalism. They must comply. And there are measures within the UN structures to deal with non-compliance. It is in the interest of the rule of law that they comply. So I do believe that there is it's a non-negotiable, the issue of compliance and the issue of international law. We need to live in a rules-based society. And when you look at the measures that the court has put with regards to how the military operations should be or should not be conducted and so forth, it's a clear indication that the only practical outcome is that there should be a ceasefire and there should be measures that are put in place to help with humanitarian aid, with civilian infrastructure and so forth. So indeed, it is going towards what we as South Africa had requested. And also you will be aware, the court also has a wider discretion in terms of the orders it can provide.
A group of University for Peace graduates from Somalia and elsewhere have been encouraged to put their educational achievements at the service of solving their country and the world's problems. At a Mogadishu ceremony, UN Secretary General's Special Representative for Somalia, Catriona Lang, was addressing graduate students at UPC's third graduation ceremony in the capital.
This is the only tertiary institution mandated exclusively to deliver peace education, and that has particular relevance here in Somalia. A lot of international partners, including the United Nations, focus very much on basic education, primary and secondary. And of course, that's hugely important. It creates the foundation. And of course, no country can really get to where it wants to be in the world economy today without a thriving and very good higher education sector.
This year, the theme of learning lasting peace resonance with the core of the mission of the UPs and underscore the vital of education as a cornerstone of peace, development, and sustainability.
UP's unique attributes lie in its specialized United Nations mandate, global community, interdisciplinary curriculum, commitment to practical learning, and emphasis on sustainable development.
And that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Olani.